Leadership Network podcast, helping ministry leaders succeed from the beginning. We're here to talk about all the stuff no one told you about ministry leadership. Christy and I are here with our friend Nicole, who's been on the show before, a repeat.
Our favorite and very first repeat offender on the show. So yeah, we're so excited to have you here. And we're going to talk about the thing we're not supposed to talk about, Bruno and Encanto and all of the things. So Nicole, so tell me something exciting. So for Lent, you wrote an article in US Catholic that incorporated Encanto and how that can play out for us in our Lenten journey. But how did you get that gig in the first place, buddy?
You know, I really relate to the persistent widow in the gospel, you know, who's just consistent and just banging down doors. I vibe with her on a personal level. You know, my husband and I had a friend who used to work at US Catholic, Stephanie Clary, who's now the Earthbeat reporter for the National Catholic Reporter. And when Stephanie was at US Catholic, you know, she had just gotten started there and basically was like, no idea is too crazy to pitch to me. And so when she left to take that job at NCR, she passed us on to Emily Santa, who's the managing editor there. And Emily said, seriously, no idea is too crazy to pitch. And so promptly, my first email was like, what I'm hearing you say is you want a doctoral dissertation on Encanto, and I am here to provide it for you.
Oh my gosh.
She was like, how about an article instead of like, it's a reasonable compromise. I think that's you know, it had just come out and, you know, not terribly long ago and right, everyone's on fire for it. Families love it. Adults love it. Everyone loves it, right? And I think if you work for the church, if you didn't see vocation like slapped all over that, like then you missed the glaring neon sign because it was so vocational. I was in the theater like ugly crying, just like hysterical. Like, John, it's all about vocation. He's like, there are children here, so we're gonna just
like, you're up here. I need you to come down here.
Just take it down a few. Just a few would be good.
Oh, really? Because for me, I was ugly crying because I was like, this is about learning that God loves you exactly like you are. Yeah, I was I didn't see it in the theater. I didn't watch it until at home. And there was like kind of all of the buzz and everything had happened. And I was, my husband had gone to Pittsburgh to pick up my son. And they both come in and I'm like I think it was whenever Antonio gets his gift and Mirabel sings a song about that. And
oh no,
whoosh. And the guys come in and they're like, what are you watching? I'm like, I'm watching Encanto and you should probably get out of here because I'm already crying. It's only the second song.
No, it gets you good. When we saw it in the theater, like we knew, right? You knew the basic premise, right? There was a lot of hype about this Lin-Manuel Miranda movie that was coming out, whatever. And for those listeners of the show who aren't aware, my husband is up there with the Jarzembowskis in terms of like diehard Disney, like just humans who have taken on the ethos of Disney, right? And so he was like ready to go. We were going to see this in theaters. And I'm like, cool. I love Lin-Manuel Miranda is the jam. So
yeah.
And when we got in line for popcorn, there were these little girls who had already purchased Mirabel costumes. Oh. And like their moms had done their hair and like painted little like butterflies, you know, it was like, and they were like so hyped. And so now I'm crying in the popcorn line. Okay. I'm full crying in the popcorn line. We have not seen the movie. The movie has not begun. No context. I am just straight crying. I'm like, every little girl deserves to see themselves in a Disney movie. John is like, once again, like, yes, like supportive of your emotions, like here.
Yeah.
We're going to drop it down a hair.
Oh, can I just say really quick too, for anybody that hasn't seen the film yet, as we go gushing on about it, it is a film about a family from Colombia. The grandmother and grandfather have to leave their village because of a hostile takeover, and there are big sacrifices made. But there's a gift given in the process of that, and the family gets the Encanto and their community, and all of the family members are given special gifts in order to build up their community, basically. So, I mean, if you don't hear gigantic, humongous, enormous Catholic and, faith-filled vibes throughout that whole entire message, I don't know what you're missing, man. But what I noticed, Nicole, is I saw like right away I saw some of there's been lots of psychological studies, right, about the characters of Encanto and how it plays out in many of the different kind of family dynamics. How do you see the Madrigals, that's the family, as icons for parish or parish life in our dynamic?
I think right out of the gate, like the coolest thing about Encanto is that we can all see ourselves in all of the characters. Like it's this, again, I'm sure they're like psychological experts who have broken this down in far more succinct manners than I have. But like thinking about like, the pressure to be strong, the pressure to be perfect, the pressure to know everything, the pressure to heal, and to fix, right? We all experience those at some point in our lives. And as we're talking about this, for those who are listening, not seeing, my dog has joined us for this conversation. She's really engaged. She's watched Encanto more than like I too have something to add. There's not enough animals, not enough dogs. But I think that's the most magical part of Encanto, right? Is that we can all see ourselves in it. And so like when you think about a parish, probably some would say their pastor is like Abuela, right? Holding on and maintaining what we think the culture of the place should be. There are definitely parishioners who are the fixers, like Julieta, right? Who have the responsibility to like fix everything and solve problems. The strong ones like Louisa, who carry it all. I think in parish families, there's also that tendency to like the perfect holy ones, right? Yes. So we think of Isabella, who's has to be perfect and beautiful all the time. Maybe Dolores the gossip. I'm sure no parish has had a person like that, but maybe once or twice. There might be one or two people like that, but you get it. And so, but when I thought about this question, like the first thing that came to my mind was the parish really like on its best day is like the townspeople who have no gifts, but when the casita falls apart, they show up to help rebuild it. And they talk about lay down your load. We have no gifts, but we are many and we do anything for you. And it's like so beautiful because that's like the best demonstration of community is like, it's not about what gifts we have. We're here to show up for you. And so on its less great days, parish life has some of those other people that we talked about, but on its best days, the parish is like the community, the town, where everyone was giving of their gifts and, sharing their food, sharing their bricks, sharing, everything. But when we think about parishes maybe faltering is when we in the parish are Abuela who are trying to hold on so tight to something that we suffocate a good thing, that we're so afraid of change, or we're afraid of just the next chapter. We're afraid of what other people are going to bring whose gifts might look different than ours. And then we may not be aware of who we hurt and alienate. So Christy was talking about Waiting on a Miracle, that song from Encanto, which I can't listen to because I will sit there and cry, as we've probably already determined it takes nothing to make very little. The bar is so low. Like my dog is sniffing around, 50-50, I'll cry about it. Like, but
get a tissue commercial, Nicole's down to cry.
Sponsored by Kleenex. Podcast is sponsored by Kleenex today. But that song is so sad because Mirabel's excluded from her own family, right? Like it's Antonio's birthday, the cousin that she's closest to, and she doesn't even make it in the family photo at his birthday. Like that's so sad, and she's thinking about feeling on the outs of her family. And so as we try to maintain our parish family and we hold on tight, like who might we be hopefully unintentionally pushing out, I think is a big question when we watch Encanto.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think there's more than just even like your pastor that might be Abuela of holding on and trying to keep things exactly the same. There's a whole bunch of people that kind of do that. And I do realize that like one of our big triggers in life about feeling like bad for ourselves and worried about our roles is the fear of irrelevance. And I think that that's part of kind of what Abuela is going through here. And I do see that all of the time in parish, but in the film, and not trying to give too much away, but it does take this giant tragedy for Abuela to kind of realize that maybe what she's been doing out of love and concern and care for the casita and her family and the community, she's holding on to tightly. Nicole, do you think that there's anything besides tragedy or a major, catastrophe that would help shake us awake out of that kind of situation?
That's so hard to say, because as humans, it's really hard for us to shake out of those things that we fall into. So I think, once again, I'll say it 400 times, probably already said it 400 times. Encanto's all about vocation, 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 vocation. Like Beyonce, okay, ladies, let's get on vocation. Like, I cannot talk about vocation enough when it comes to this movie, or ever in life, but specifically in this. And so I think, sort of my roundabout way to answering the question is, like, the only thing that can shake us out of those things is a sense of like personal awareness, right? Like, to know yourself really, really well, first of all, makes you a better person, a better Christian, a better person in relationships to those around you, a better minister. Like, it makes you a better everything, like, because you're the best version of yourself when you know yourself really well. When you know exactly who God created you to be, you're attentive to your gifts, you're attentive to your growing edges. And so to shake us out of those things, like tragedy and trauma usually have an unfortunately effective method of doing that. But, usually a better way is to know ourselves and to be attentive, like, okay, so what are my gifts and who did God create me to be? And where are my gifts not? Where are those growing edges? Where am I not called to be the gift, right? And that will help us be more effective. I think it's a funny irony of the movie that, like, that they don't talk about really. It doesn't get super named, but Abuela doesn't have a gift, right? She doesn't have a magical gift. All the, everyone else gets all these cool gifts. Abuela doesn't have a gift. And so Mirabel is the successor to Abuela because she also doesn't have a gift, but their gift is keeping the family together.
Yes.
Right. So, like, in its best iteration is keeping the family together. In its worst iteration, it is holding on to you tight. Like all gifts have that sort of double-edged,
positive and negative.
Well, one of the things that I noticed this last time around, though, too, in watching it, is the shift came when Mirabella stepped up and had a hard conversation with Abuela, saying you're wrong. Like, everybody was not happy. You thought they were happy. They are actually not happy. And sometimes we have to have those hard conversations in order for the spirit to move and for God to be able to move us to the next level within our ministry and our volunteers to the next level of ministry. So those hard conversations are necessary. And I think when we have that self-awareness, if we could be strong enough to be able to have that conversation before catastrophe, before the cracks start to become a real problem, I think that's really where we need to kind of get to, I mean, just something I was thinking, especially we previous on one of our previous podcasts, we talked to Ken DeMall, and one of the things that he brought up is, having hard conversations with volunteers who are not necessarily in a place that uses their gifts and talents in the best way, right? So how do we have that conversation without pushing people away, but moving them into a new ministry or a new vocation or a new place for them to share their gifts? It may not be in this ministry, but maybe it's in another parish ministry.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we fear conflict, right? Like all humans, even those of us from New Jersey who are like born amongst the conflict and let it, just vibe into our whole beings, right?
Yeah.
Like, I do not fear conflict. I'm sure somewhere my husband will be listening to this and be like, maybe fear it a little more, like just a notch more fear would probably behoove you in life. Like, just, we all still do, even we all have a little like, skeeve about conflict. And so that's a good thing, right? So people say, like, how do we move past that? That's not conflict. It's for the greater, it's not conflict for conflict's sake.
Well, and a friend of mine once said, Amy McEntee, you may know Nicole, she once said something to me that kind of shifted my perspective on conflict. Conflict moves the story forward. You can't have a good story without conflict, right? You can't move to the conclusion without the conflict, without the height of the conflict, right? So when I see conflict now, I'm like, okay, if I want to get to the end of this part of the story or the end of this chapter, I need to move through this. I can't go around it. I can't go over it. I can't go under it. I can't bury it. I have to confront it. I need to step into it. I need to feel the discomfort and move past it in that manner with everything that I learn and grow with through that conflict to get to where I want to at the conclusion, quote unquote, of this story.
Which you're absolutely right is exactly what happens in Encanto, right? Like they had to have that, which, right, like we could all reasonably conjecture most movies, most Disney movies are going to have that, but that's exactly what happens. The bravery, because you have to be brave, right? You have to have a little bravery, a little courage to move through conflict instead of around, over, under, praying it disappears.
Well, the other thing I think is interesting that I noticed in my last run through of the film was, Nicole, I was catching that vibe between Abuela and Mirabel, but what I noticed from my watch was that they both had that sense of like connecting the family, but Abuela had lost focus. And so she was not looking at the family. She started looking at the structure, and she was holding the walls of the casita as the thing that is the focus. And she stopped seeing the people that were making the casita real. And that was the difference between Mirabel and Abuela, is that Mirabel was seeing the individual members of the family. And if that's not completely and totally established by the very first song, when she runs through every wonderful detail about every single member of her family that she can say, and even when the kids say to her, you know, what's your gift? And she's like, my gift is that I'm in this family and that I get to know and love and be part of these people's lives every single day, you know. And I think Abuela had that thought. You see that, you know, played out in the backstory. But I think that's part of it too. Like our view sometimes shifts a little bit and we lose focus about why it is that what we have in front of us is so beautiful and wonderful and terrific. And Sarah, it's funny because I thought too of the conversation that we had with Ken, where, you know, he talked about maybe you have a person that like is in love with the rosary. And so they say, oh, I'll get involved in youth ministry, but they're like giving the rosary in an obsessive compulsive kind of way to teenagers. And the teenagers are like, I don't think I understand what's happening here, you know. And I think like that same thing, like where does your focus need to be as you come to ministry? And it is the people. It is not the building or the location or the physicality of any of that. The beauty of the church and the reason why it's been established and succeeded for as long as it has is the humans that are the church that make that, you know, a possibility, right?
The miracle is you.
Yeah.
The miracle is you.
All right.
That song makes me cry too.
Yeah. And that's my other question too, is like, how do we help people, especially because ministry is so much about the doing of the stuff and the things, right? And it's very busy. How do we as ministers try to keep our focus on that it is the miracle is both ourselves and the people that are in front of us? And do you have any tips or helps about how to maintain that focus?
I mean, I would point right back to all of you. I think it's a song that really hits the nail on the head, because if we believe what we say we believe about the miracle of all life and the dignity of the human person and what it means to be created in the image and likeness of God, then it's as simple as that. There's nothing we can bring. There's no giftedness we will have that will match just our innate human dignity and the innate human dignity of the people around us, not just those of us who minister, but everybody in the community, in our family of faith. And we talk a lot about things being by virtue of our baptism, right? So for the vast majority of us who are cradle Catholics, we didn't choose our own baptism. So the gifts poured out in that sacrament, we know are poured out by grace, not by our own giftedness, not by anything we did. There's nothing baby Nicole or an adult in RCIA does to contribute to make those gifts happen. And once again, it all goes back to vocation. Oh my gosh, someone made this a tea drinking game. You know, every time Nicole talks about vocation, like get the mug out, it's all about vocation. But I think discerning your gifts and understanding your vocation comes with this like critical caveat that you are more than just your gifts. No matter how much you discern and how much clarity you get, you have to remember that there's something beyond that. It's not like an accruing of skills on a resume, but it's knowing yourself and who God created you to be. Because when we fall victim to thinking only about our gifts, we lose sight of the one that gave them to us. Sort of like how you were saying earlier, Christy, about Abuela gets so consumed with the structure and holding on to it very tight that she forgets the ones that make the family worth being a part of. And so
Mhm.
when we remember that we're a perfect creation of a loving God, and that everyone else is a perfect creation of a loving God, and all of us have gifts, but we're even more beyond that, it's easier, I think, to hold all of that in tension. But of course, yeah, ministry, it's very easy for us to get caught up in like your skills and your giftedness, what you do. But then of course, a song that I don't think gets enough credit in Encanto is What Else Can I Do? It's Isabella's song with the flowers. And I love, first of all, I will drive in the car, I will vacuum the house, I will do anything listening to the Encanto soundtrack. It's so
heck
catchy.
yeah.
It's so catchy. Oh my God, like I can't stop. But I love that song because there is a lot of pressure in ministry to be perfect, right? We're talking about giftedness, but like another word we could use is perfection, right? Is a sense of holiness. Like, because when you're a ministerial person, there's like a different layer to it, right? There's people who have their jobs and want to be good at their jobs and are responsible for managing a team, et cetera, et cetera. But like, if you work at Prudential, you're not trying to be holy at Prudential. Prudential's not holding that up as a barometer of effectiveness for selling insurance, right? Like, to knowledge, I don't work at Prudential, so that is just a conjecture on my part. But like in ministry, our success is tied to this perfection, this holiness, like making sure that you're always at mass every Sunday. Don't miss the Sunday. Maybe don't miss a daily mass. Making sure you're at all the parish events. Like, are you plugged in? Do you know what's going on? Do you know the people? And like, that's a lot. That's a lot to keep up with, and managing your own spirituality, which is a whole other, conversation for another time. But there's a lot of spiritual pressure that comes with ministry too, beyond like markers of success in any job. And so that's why I love that song, because all of us are going to fall short of that perfection. But when Isabella finally can just be herself without that pressure to be perfect, she experienced that joy that God desires for us, right? Like she's finally free. I love it's one of the last verses, deeply, madly, truly in the moment. And I'm like, oh gosh, yeah, that's like so what God desires for us. Like, do it, just like be in the moment, just create, and like just let like your gifts explode. Like, that's so beautiful. But often we've cultivated that pressure to the opposite, right?
Yeah.
We've cultivated that pressure of success. How many people are coming? And are you leading the rosary perfectly, right? Don't you ever need to look up any of those prayers. Don't you dare. Like,
I have a card that I keep in my pouch that I follow along with. Yeah. And that too, girl.
Because I like panicky when I need it. I'm like, oh gosh, this is the time. This is the time I'm going to mess it up. Like, I haven't been saying the rosary for years. This is
the other, I think it's a great dovetail to what you're talking about there about the perfection is Luisa and Bruno exhibit what happens when you're not perfect.
Luisa.
Poor Luisa.
Twitch.
With the eye twitch, because if I don't keep doing everything to everybody's unbelievable standards and hold that all in, and any idea that I maybe can't measure up, I'm not good enough. Because what happened to Bruno? Like, you say things that people don't want to hear and you're out. Like, we don't want you here, and we don't want to hear that. And it was a situation I had recently, work related, but that was like, oh, that's being negative. That's negativity. And you're like, actually, I'm just trying to point out like what the realities are of what we're living with. Not, I'm just saying, like, in a SWOT survey, like,
have they ever met John the Baptist? Like, let me tell you about some negativity. He's gonna bring you some saltiness. Yikes.
Brother had words.
Yeah. Jeez. But yeah, I mean, Louisa, I'm an only child, so there's definitely some pressure for sure. But my husband, who is the eldest, is like, he watched Louisa, he was like, oh, pressure. Yeah.
I was actually confused whenever I found out later that it's actually Louisa's the middle child.
Yep.
It's
Isabella's the oldest.
Isabella is the oldest, but they both have the same kind of problem, right?
Yeah, I always joke about OCS, only child syndrome, in our house, but like there's also OCS, oldest child syndrome, and John like really felt that. Like, he was watching, he's like, yeah, like this sense that you're the first, and so there's a lot of pressure on you, which obviously sort of only applies to Louisa. But in ministry, when we get caught up in that too, that the giftedness, the doing, the holiness, the positivity, right? That's sort of like another conversation.
Great.
Toxic positivity in Christianity. I know that's
a whole other podcast.
Another whole podcast.
It's 4 hours, right? We have 6 hours
yeah.
to talk about that. But then you do fall, like Louise's song, again, Surface Pressure. I was dancing to it this morning, getting ready, just getting in the zone. But the crushing weight of expectation, like when she says that,
Yes.
you're like, yeah. And what happens if you falter? But then my favorite part is the bridge when she's like freeing up some room for joy or relaxation. I'm like, oh, Louisa, we all would like some of that, girl. Like, I would like to be in a hammock with the donkeys, just like, that sounds so nice. But that's the thing with that too, is like, our ministries are not the only thing. Sometimes that's another layer of the pressure and perfection, I think, is that then it has to be the thing that consumes your life. So then you don't have joy, relaxation, or simple pleasures. Yeah. Right. You have to be at the parish 24 hours a day. You have to know every single thing that's going on. It has to be your whole world. And so like, what happens if you have, I'm going to throw a drastic monkey wrench in this, a hobby you'd like to pursue? Something just for funsies outside. I know for those listening, we all three of us are clutching our pearls at the thought.
Cringe.
Pleasure, doing things just for the fun of it,
Crazy talk.
I know. See, unlike Bruno, I'm gonna get booted. John the Baptist, poor Bruno.
You guys are talking about pressure and perfection, and the thing that's coming to my mind. Well, I also root for the underdog. Okay. So we've been talking a lot of smack about Abuela Alma.
There you go.
So I'm going to support Abuela Alma for a minute, because let's look at this reality. She and her husband were running from war with triplets.
And they're like, textually, they also have to be like 18, right? Like,
right. Yeah, they're babies.
Now, they're not 40 doing this. They're like,
first, when I saw that, I thought, what a brilliant depiction of first generation immigrants in our Hispanic Latina community. Now, we don't have a Latina on this call, and at some point I'd love to be able to get some insight from the cultural community, but I just thought, I don't know if we've ever seen this on screen before. Abuela's job from that moment on, from when Abuelo died, her job was the safety of her family, was the safety of the people that they were taking into a new land, right? She is a Moses figure there in that moment, right? Her job is safety, right? I know, Paul would be proud. My husband loves Moses, but her job was safety. So really, this story is showing the generational differences, the first, second, third generation immigrant difficulties that I think we are seeing in our parishes now. So there is the trauma that our first generation immigrants, no matter nationality, have felt. And that has transferred through the cell system and structure of their family. And so there is an inherent trauma that's there of that experience. And generations are trying to work through that. And what do I mean as a second, third, fourth, whatever generation immigrant to this country? Now we don't necessarily need safety. We are safe. Now we need to really embrace who we are as a whole human being in this new space, as somebody who has lived and grown up in safety, with no longer the need at that, for this specific family, of that trauma of being unsafe. And safety, like, people immigrate for different reasons. A majority of those reasons revolve around safety and security, to leave a country and to come here. Yeah, Christy.
Can I say something too here? Yeah. I was listening to a podcast. I won't mention the name because your hair will just blow straight back. You'll be shocked who's I was listening to. But it caused me to watch the latest Pixar film, which is called Turning Red. And
I haven't seen it yet, but I heard it's meant for millennials. I hear
very recommended. Anyway, in the podcast, my favorite girl, Brene Brown, was talking to the director, and they were also talking about this generational trauma.
drinking game on this podcast.
Yes,
I feel like it's a
because
very,
Christy said Brene Brown.
it's a very relatable situation here with the generational trauma. And it is that, like, what Abuela went through was so deeply traumatic. And so then, and actually, I just read something the other day that was talking about how the moment that that happens, you watch as the candle becomes real in the background, the animation is that the mountains build up around where the casita is going to be. So like we're building walls around keeping ourselves safe. But as far as the generational trauma goes, is that when a generation experiences such deep, horrific things, they develop coping mechanisms to deal with that. Then they pass that on to their children and their grandchildren. But the children and the grandchildren are living in a different time where they are not experiencing those same things. And so they have these coping mechanisms, but to cope with what is the question? And are those mechanisms even helpful any longer in the particular circumstance we find ourselves now? And this is where I would recommend folks also watch Turning Red, because it is Encanto is expressing the same kind of sentiment of, do I need those skills? And I don't want to dishonor my family. And so maintaining my traditions and my culture and all of those things is very important, but I also have to be true to who I am and what I'm living through and dealing with now. So where's the balance with that? Which, Nicole, you've already said a couple of times to the questions that I've asked so beautifully, that is a balance, and nobody really does know. There's not a solid answer to say it is this or it is that. And this is where we're talking about messiness, right, in life.
Yeah. And that's where I think the Christian community then has a particular responsibility to accompany people through that, because I think what both of you are getting at, which is really important, is that in the United States, the Catholic Church is a church of immigrants, right? At different chapters and different, and still to this day, you know, I live in the Northeast, and so we were immigrant city, right? There in town, we have 47 Catholic churches, because you had to have the Italian church, the Irish church, the German church, the French Canadian church. Everyone had to have that. There had to be 4 different Italian churches, because God forbid, you know, if you're at Mount Carmel, oh my God, you can't go to San Gennaro. That would just be insane. So that's what we come from, and the story of immigrants in the Catholic Church has evolved, right? It looks different in 2022 than it did then, but the spirit is still the same. And so then the question becomes for us as church, because if we're in ministry, we are the hands and feet of Christ to people. We are the church to people, whether we want to take the onus of that or not, we are. And so then, like, how do we accompany people through that trauma? How do we accompany the older generations, or the first generation, I should say, who are carrying that and have those mechanisms, and we see them sometimes go, ooh, see what that is there. And how do we accompany the next generations who, as you both said so well, have lived in safety, are living in a different reality, and are figuring out how to hold their truth in tension with their family and what they're carrying, like all these pieces of who they are, all these things that make up who God created them to be. And so then what's the role of the Christian community in that? Like, I think is a really big question, because it's not just to have pizza night for the teens, right? Like, I mean, that's good, you know, or to have Rosary on Tuesday. All those things are good. Like, they're not bad, but what's the role of the Christian community in accompanying people through that stuff? And it's going to take on a different vibe in each place, but we have a responsibility to say, like, we know our flock, we know our people, we know what they're carrying. And so, like, to be attentive to that and to ensure that whether it's an event, whether it's an opportunity for worship, whatever, that we are attentive to all of those realities, and that everyone then finds their home in our community and doesn't feel like, because of what they're carrying, they're cut out from our community. Or now here's my moment again, or because they don't have a gift, because they don't have a magical gift, Mirabelle. We want them all in the family photo. We want them all in the family photo. I'm never getting over Mirabelle not in the family photo.
Yeah, that was rough when I first realized that. I'm like, what?
Mirabelle, don't look around. It was
a photo? That's ridiculous.
I'm like,
I thought from the very beginning she had a gift. She had empathy and the ability to see people. And that is magical. When you are in the presence of somebody who sees you for every beautiful bit that you are, that is a sacramental space. That is a magical moment that it's ineffable, you know? And I think she had that from the beginning. She had pride in her family and saw all of them for who they are, even her perfect sister, right? Who she kind of like rolled her eyes at, but she saw that there was beauty in all of her family. Whether they were doing things special or not, that there was beauty there, and that they had a place and a role in this world. And that empathy and cheerleading, right, is what we all need. We need somebody else to help us to see what our true gifts are, right? And underlying other people's expectations, right? And that's what Mirabelle does. And that's what it's important for us to look for in our volunteers. It are people who can see beyond the Christian expectations to really where God's gifts lie in that person, and to help pull those gifts out and to break down those mountains that we build up around ourselves, I mean, such a great movie. And I'll have to watch Turning Red. I was going to watch that one too pretty soon.
You'll love it.
This is why I am convinced, though, that Mirabelle is the successor to Abuela in so many ways, because like what nobody talks about is when they show like the montage of like how everybody got their gifts, right? That Abuela had the candle, right? And they all get to go to their little doors and all of that. Like Abuela is the one that pulls the gifts out of each of them. She's the one that walks each of them to the door with the candle. She was that person once upon a time. And for all the reasons we've already discussed, it gets murkier for her, and there's other things, but like she was the one that did that. And so that's why I love the relationship between Mirabelle and Abuela, because it's beautiful and complicated. Like for those Disney folks who have seen Moana, which also will make me ugly cry.
Don't get Christy started on Moana. That'll be another one for us.
But I loved Moana because I was very close to my grandmother. And so, of course, like the whole underbelly of the movie is like Moana being close to her grandmother. Grandmother dies. Nicole cries for the entirety of the movie, right? There you go. I summed up the whole movie for you if you want to know what that's about. Nicole cries for the whole movie. But like Abuela's relationship with Mirabelle is complicated. It's less like, Disney nice, right? Like Disney usually does really nice relationships like that. Like Moana and her grandmother are really close and super beautiful. Abuela and Mirabelle, they love each other, but it's complicated. And
I think the Abuela and Mirabelle situation is way more, and I'm just saying this as a mom right now, it's when that child is you to a T, they as the adult make you go straight up the wall like the cat with their claws in the ceiling, because you see every
taste.
You're like, no, don't do that. What are you on? So I think
if my mother is listening to this, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Mom.
So another thing that I noticed this go round, we're talking about who walks the young people up to the door. Abuela does that to everybody up to Mirabelle. And Mirabelle walks down the aisle with all the people around her by herself, right? And Mirabelle walks the young
Antonio,
thank you. Antonio down because he says, I need you.
Yeah.
Now, if you also look at the doors that Abuela Alma walks people down with all have their adult self on the door. Right?
Yes.
And then Mirabelle walks Antonio down the aisle and it is a child Antonio. So she is pulling, she sees him as he is in that moment, right? So all of the rest, when you see that, they're their adult selves.
Yeah, wow.
I
know, right?
Yeah. It's so good because there's like, you could watch it 100 times and get something every time. Like it's so exquisitely put together. And thought, just like the Lord made us, exquisitely put together.
Yes.
So many pieces.
Yes, with miracles and gifts and things that we need to be looking for in other people. We need to continually go back to people that we might not like or might have a tough time with, and continue to go back and to look for their giftedness, because it is there. There is no one on this earth that God has not gifted.
Right? I'd say, and to me, that's loving them. And yes. I'll say this too. I had this happen to me in ministry. I was in a place, I was really upset. I was very irritable and angry at the whole entire thing, and thankful for prayer and spiritual direction. But through that process, I realized I was doing nothing toward loving the people that I was supposed to be serving. And that, you know, friends, that makes all the difference.
Yes.
It's true. Absolutely
Yes.
true. Yep. And that's what happens when Abuela starts loving everyone in the family exactly as they are.
Nicole, you're gonna make me cry.
I know. It's such a good movie. I know. I talk about it obsessively. Like, thank God I married a Disney guy, because that's probably the only reason he could talk about it as much as I could talk about it. Because he's like, we found a Disney thing that like broke you. That's good. Like, let's do this.
Well, before we all end up in a puddle of tears, we have yet again blown past our 30 minutes by quite a bit this time. So I don't know, we might need to find a cut somewhere, but or maybe not. We'll just let it run. But thank you, everybody, for joining us today as we talk to Nicole about Encanto. Yeah, Encanto. I just forgot the name of the movie. Whatever. This is live, folks. This is live podcasting.
Real life. This is real life.
Oh, this is real life.
Yeah, and also we're not perfect either. So we've already
are
learned.
not perfect.
And we'll still be okay.
And it will be.
Hey,
It will
everybody,
be. It will be. Well, thank you everyone for joining us as we talk about things nobody talks about, like God in the movies. That's not true. Paul talks about, we talk about that a lot. But Encanto, I haven't seen a Christian Catholic connection with Encanto before Nicole's article in US Catholic. So check that out. We'll find the link and post it below. Find us on social media. We're all over the place and now on YouTube. So please click like and subscribe, and please share with your family and friends, especially those who are new to ministry. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a great day. Bye.
Peace.